Welcome to another episode of the Reformed and Charismatic podcast. This is Aaron Running, and got Joseph Rosales here with us, who was absent last week, but he's finally
Good to be
back.
back. Good to be back.
Yep, and we got a special guest today. So we got our friend Brian Hampel, who was with us, and then he left us.
Yeah.
And we miss him. I'm gonna bring him in here. There's Brian. So we all met at the same church, and we're part of like a little Bible study or like a men's group type thing that we had with one of our pastors. And now you were in Knoxville, Tennessee. So I'm just gonna let you introduce yourself, Brian. Tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do.
Yeah, hey guys. Thank you for letting me be on a chat and share our story and our testimony with you guys. So I'm a native Californian. I was born in California, born in SoCal, spent most of my life in the Central Valley. Joined the Army, left, spent a couple years in North Carolina, then moved to Arizona, and then brought my family back to California. And, my kids like to joke about how one of my sons was born on the East Coast in North Carolina. My middle son was born in Arizona, and my youngest son was born on the West Coast. He was born in Visalia. So we've had kids all across the United States. Yeah. But we spent the majority of our married life and back in Visalia, and it was probably 2020 is when we really started kind of feeling like we wanted to go, felt the pull to go. But it's my wife and I've been married for, she's been mad at me, 19 years I think. And we just celebrated our anniversary. We have 3 sons, an 18-year-old, and now a 17-year-old, and now an 11-year-old. And now we live about 30 minutes southwest of Knoxville, Tennessee. And we made the move out here about June of this year.
Yeah.
Right on, man. Well, we miss you out here in California, but we know that you made a decision for your family, and from what I can tell, you're a lot happier there. And the last, or I think it was 2 episodes ago, we had on Jenkins, who kind of shared like the flip side of things. Like he had the opportunity to move to Idaho, and he decided to stay in California because he felt like that's what God was calling him to. So why don't you tell us just a little bit about like the decision to move, like why you guys made that and all that.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was probably for us, there was a lot of folks. It's probably when, some of the mass exoduses started happening, was around 2020. And it was around then that, my wife and I started feeling very unsettled in California. But, that's just the beginning of the conversation. Where do you go from there? What do you actually do with that feeling? And so, we had the opportunity to visit some states. And like I said, we lived in North Carolina for a couple of years. And so we've been there. We lived in Arizona for a few years. And so we'd been there, and I visited family in Washington. And then once we really started to kind of feel the pull that, maybe we need to leave, maybe we want to, leave California. The next big question is obviously, okay, well, where do you go? It's all well and good to want to leave, but there are big logistical issues about, okay, well, where do you go? What are we going to do when we get there? Do we know anyone there? Do we have jobs? What's the housing? There's just 1,000 questions, that we had to wrestle with. The first and foremost of them being, where do you want to go? And the United States is huge. You could spend every minute and every dollar to your name trying to find the perfect place, all the while not realizing the perfect place just doesn't exist. And so what we did is we spent, we took a vacation, Cassie and I went and saw Montana, and Montana was just beautiful. We loved it, but there wasn't a lot of work for us there. And so we're like, we'd love it to be here, but when it comes to actually providing for the family, we couldn't do it. And then the next year we'd saved up some money, and then we went to Houston, and I liked Houston. She didn't vibe with Houston, and so ultimately, it wasn't really what we were looking for. It was a very big city, not really the thing we were looking for. And then the following year, we were wondering, well, it's our yearly time to get out and explore, because we for years we felt the pull, like trying to square a round circle, and we just it just never felt right. And that feeling of pulling from our center of gravity, just like from our chest, it never went away. And as much as we prayed about it, and we just kept feeling like God was saying, it's time to go, it's time to go. But where do you go from there? And then so last year, we said, well, where are we going this year? And Cassie's like, my wife Cassie says, well, I really like country music, and so I'd like to go see Nashville. I'd like to go see the Grand Ole Opry, and some of my favorite country stars have these restaurants out in Nashville, and I'd like to go see all that. And it's like, okay, yeah, sure, I have no problem with that. And there's a place out in there's this little town called Oak Ridge in eastern Tennessee that I'd heard had some work that was kind of in my line of work. And so I was like, well, while we're out there, why don't we just drive east a little bit and go see what that town looks like? And so we got to Nashville, and Nashville is a cool place. It's a big city. It's really neat for like college age folk. It's a big party, kind of a party town. So it's a cool place to just go take some friends and go see a show or go have some fun dinner. But we didn't really click too much with like living there. But as soon as we started driving east, it was like, it's hard to explain, but like in our hearts, it just started, little boxes just started checking, and it just started to feel right. And then we got to Oak Ridge, and we sat in this little, I'll never forget, we sat in this little like town, little square, this little town, and the football stadium was just over here, and the rolling trees, it was in a little valley. I mean, it was like something out of a TV show, and we're like, wow, this is beautiful. And then we went over to Knoxville for dinner that night or the next night, and we're sitting in a place called Market Square, and all of a sudden, Cass and I were just kind of like, this is it. I'm like, I think this checks a whole lot more boxes than it doesn't, and that was something we had to wrestle with too for a long time, which is, if you're looking for utopia on earth, like, you're just not going to find it. Yeah. So there was, we saw a homeless person, and we did see, you know, uh, a little bit of trash, you know what I mean? But what we saw a lot more of was, kids playing on scooters, and a lot of, just a lot of churches. And so, like I said, a lot of the things that we were looking for, things just started to feel right. We started to feel that peace in us. We're like, yep, I think this is it. And then so once we um, figured out the where, now the how comes into play. It's like, okay, now we've figured out where we want to go. How are we going to do it? And you have to start asking yourself, well, there's a lot of questions. I mean, the logistics of just uprooting your family and leaving everything behind is massive. And so before I go any further with that, like, I just really want to impress to you and anyone, to the audience, that this was not a decision that we took lightly. This is a life-changing decision that, Cass and I were making for us and for our kids and grandkids. And, this was one of those decisions that's going to alter the future of our whole, progeny. Everyone that comes after us is going to change because of this decision. And so we prayed about it a lot. I mean, we prayed about it for years, like, if, Lord, if this is something that you want us to do, you know, don't let us forget about it. And he didn't, it was something that he just never took off of our hearts. And something that scared Cassie and me. I mean, I told Cassie this. I was like, if God wants us out of here, he's not going to make it more comfortable for us here. He's going to just make it more uncomfortable for us until we do what he wants us to do. And I kind of think about Jonah, it's like, he's like, hey, I need you to go to Nineveh. And Jonah's like, nah, I'm going to go over there, and, and so, I think about things like that. And so, whenever we realize that it really was, the Lord was really putting on our hearts, hey, it's time to go. We actually become more fearful of defying the Lord at that point, because he's not going to go, okay, you're right. Yeah, yes, you don't. I don't want you to leave. Eventually he was just going to come. The walls were going to start closing in more and more, um, until we did what he wanted us to do. And so once we found the place that we wanted to go, um, we kind of we prayed a lot about it and we talked a lot about it. And one of the things we came up with was that whichever one of us got a job first, that would be the trigger event. That would be the thing that said, okay, the Lord's ready for us to go, and then we'll go. And so Cassie got a job working urban youth ministry up in southern Knoxville, and that was it. Once she accepted that job, it was that was kind of like go time. And I look back at and that, and it was only a couple months ago, but it kind of feels like a lifetime ago, to be honest. Because I don't know, maybe you guys thought we were nuts too, and I'm sure we had some people that were a little bit nervous for us, and rightfully so. We were terrified for ourselves, because people would ask, they're like, well, where are you guys gonna, you guys have a house? And we'd say, nope. Like, well, Cassie's got a job. Brian, you got a job? And I'm like,
Nope.
nope. Like, but the reality is, with the practical application of my faith demands that if the Lord is telling me to do something, it's not up to me to figure out the how when he's telling me to do it. And when he put it on our hearts and said, guys, you need to leave. I'm ready for you to leave. I always just kind of pictured that, Indiana Jones taking that leap of faith from the lion's head, and just going for it, and just believing that whatever we felt, that the Lord was going to provide something. And he has provided for us in the most miraculous ways since we've been here. And it's wild. So yeah, we left, and that was tough. It's really tough for the kids. Or actually, Dean, my youngest, he was happy. He's ecstatic. He would chant Tennessee the whole way there. My middle son struggled. It was really tough. And my oldest son, he's there with, doing gap year with Radiant Church. And so he's getting a lot out of that, and he'll be coming out later. But the trip out, leaving Visalia, it almost felt like we were under attack in a lot of ways, because we had a completely out of the blue, Aaron, I think I told you this before we left, we had this out of the blue attack of fleas at the house. And it was something that I had never seen before. I mean, just out of nowhere. I mean, the flea infestation was wild. We're packing up our stuff and leaving. So when we left Visalia, the trip from Visalia, California to Knoxville, Tennessee took us 5 days, driving to get there. And so we drove with 3 vehicles, two grandmas, a dog, 3 cats, and so it was a heck of a memorable trip.
Didn't you lose your phone too in like the U-Haul or something like that?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Thank you for reminding me. I forgot about that. Yeah. I lost my phone the night before we left. It was on the back of the vehicle, or I was on the back of one of our cars. Like, I left it on the bumper. And then my my oldest son was driving around Visalia the night before, and it got lost somewhere in Visalia. It dumped on a sidewalk somewhere. So I lost my phone. Yeah, so that was a good start. And then we blew out the transmission in my Tahoe in Texas. And so halfway through, like, the vehicle just stops working. And so the whole convoy pulls off in Texas. And yep, sure as heck, blew the transmission right there. So we had to leave it there, tow it over to a transmission shop, get a rental, and finish the trip out with a rental over to the Airbnb. And we stayed for about 3 weeks, at an Airbnb. And then I had to get a one-way plane ticket back to Amarillo, Texas, to go pick up the vehicle once it had been repaired, and do the trip again, which was another, 18-hour car drive. So it was rough. I mean, the nuts and bolts, and the brass tacks of moving an entire family across the country. It's not easy. It's a big task. It's, and it's challenging, but whenever you're, there's all the faith that goes involved. And, if you're doing what the Lord wants you to do, it makes it that much easier, even though it's hard. It just makes it that much easier, because you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, and it in your heart, it in your soul. that this is what I'm supposed to be doing. So it makes it easier. But yeah, we got to the Airbnb in probably June. And at this point, no, I still didn't have a job. We didn't have a place to live. We hadn't found a place to rent yet. And so we're really coming down to the wire. And I still remember, praying and getting frustrated at certain points and going, hey, Lord, like I know that, it's all on your time. This is all your timing, God, but yeah, boy, we're getting close.
Yeah.
And so, one day, like my son Zach, he reaches out to, he wanted to play for Maryville High School football, and he reaches out and says, hey coach, I'm new to the area, I want to come play. And the coach explained the rules for playing in this area and how you have to live within the area. And so, but from the point that Zach had reached out to the coach, by that evening, the coach had reached out to Cassie. And I think probably by that night or the next morning, they were asking us, we had a realtor reach out saying that they had a house for us to come rent.
Jeez.
And it was one of those things where it was a block away from the school and it was within our price range. And Cassie and I just kind of chuckle. We're like, well, when the Lord provides, like, it's like, haha, I know the Lord's got a sense of humor too. And he's like, he wanted to wait till the last minute just to, have a good little chuckle, but he did, he provided a house for us at the very last minute in the best way possible. And then, the place that I wanted to come see, when we first came out here about a year ago for my work, the place that really drew us out here called back and asked if I wanted the job. And so I started working a couple months later. In the meantime, I was able to work with Cassie's company, doing urban ministry, working with some kids, after school program stuff. And so that was a blessing. But, taking a step back and like looking at how this whole process has rolled out in a journey that really started in, 3 years ago, it's unbelievable to be, to see it the way that God has put us in this place. And it's just that, and it's interesting too. And I wanted to share this with you guys. When Dean, my youngest son, when he started playing football, we met with his football coach and he goes, hey, yeah, you guys are from California. And I said, yeah, because we kind of get a bad rap sometimes out here. And he was like, yeah, we're from California. And I was wearing one of my Disciple Threads t-shirts.
Yeah.
And he says, hey man, it's like God. And this is the first time I'd ever met this football coach. He comes up to me, he goes, what's your name? Brian. He goes, Brian, God's doing something big. And I was like, well, what do you mean? He goes, well, I live in an apartment complex and almost everyone in that apartment complex is from California. And every single one of them is saying that God just spoke to them and said, it's time to go. And
Wow.
and he said, every one of them just said, like, the Lord spoke to me and said, it's time to go. And he said, my whole apartment complex is filled with, ex-Californians who are pulled out. And I'm a part of this newcomers to Maryville Facebook group. And it's where people share things, I'm new to the area. Where do I get my Christmas tree? Kind of things like that. And every once in a while, people will get on there and say, like, I'm here because I heard Jesus telling me, hey, I need to leave New York or I need to leave California. And they just answered the call. And it's powerful stuff, man. Whatever the Lord's doing, the Lord works in mysterious and multiple ways beyond our understanding. And it's wild. It's wild to be a part of that. But yeah, man, it's been a crazy journey, and the Lord has provided in every single way that we could have possibly asked for. He took care of us, and so we're super blessed and just excited to see, what the future holds. All I know is that, we kind of did our part, and I've told my wife this. We've had long conversations about this, obviously, because this is such a huge deal. And it's like, maybe it was never about us per se. Maybe we are just a really small link in a very long chain, and all we did was our part. Like maybe it just has to do with the kids or the grandkids. And as of right now, we've fulfilled what God needed us to do. And so, sometimes I think about that, I always kind of look at, I think of the Bible, and some of those long lines of this person begat this person, begat this person, begat this person. But then I stopped to think, and, each one of those begats was a person with an infinitely complicated and eventful life. They had events, they had pains, they had traumas, they had all these things happen to them in their life. But, at the end of the, in the Bible, they are just a name that begat someone else. And so I think about that. Sometimes our part that we play in God's story, um, sometimes it's a small part, but it's a really important part. And whenever we look at things from, a 30,000-foot view, that's the kind of the way that I try to picture how this move went. Is just maybe we just did our part, and
Yeah.
so we'll see.
Yeah. Real quick, I just want to just say we definitely miss you guys, man. I see your boy all the time, and I'm like, man, I wish Brian was here. We had our Friday nights thing going on, or be able to get some coffee. But hey, I've heard testimonies of God bringing people to California and then taking people out. So if it's the Lord's will, it's the Lord's will, and I'm happy for you guys. And what I'm curious is, since this move, um, do you feel like you've um, come against more spiritual warfare, or are you guys more at peace, or was there just that initial attack when leaving? Um, so like if you could like share a little bit about that.
Yeah. So we ended up we found a church that we become members with,
Hmm.
and we're really happy there. So what I would say that the issues that we've encountered spiritually is that this has the logistics of the move have been challenging in so much that we don't know anybody here. Um, we have no family. We turns out we knew someone from we went to youth group in Visalia with, which is another weird God thing, but so we had no family, no friends, and we just were out here flying solo, trying to start up these new lives from absolute scratch. Trying to make new friends, find a church, find a new community. And there's a lot of believers out here, and it's like, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of Jesus out here, but the enemy is wily. The enemy is smart, and so he knows whenever he can find a crack, he'll exploit whatever weakness he can find. And so the spiritual warfare that I would say that we've probably come against is just not necessarily like the geography of it, but more trying to find our foothold. And even in our weakness, when we have to lean on God, um, is the uncertainty of this move, because it's easy to feel lonely out here, because like I said, we don't know anybody. And so playing the tape forward and trusting the Lord that he wants us here, it's like, okay, well, we're here, but now we can't just sit on our hands, like we have to live our lives. And so we found a good community at church, and but battling the enemy who is doesn't want us here, and doesn't like the fact that we were trying to be as obedient as we could. I think he probably tries to exploit our own weaknesses and things like finding friends,
Mm.
finding that community, um, trying to exacerbate feelings of loneliness or desperation like that. And so it's easy to kind of come at it, jump at each other, um, and so that's something that I think we have to um, come up against and pray
Yeah,
against and
sure.
be aware of, because all of a sudden you don't realize like how much of a community you have until you've left it.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you're like, oh snap, I feel really alone. uh, and
Yeah.
so not being able to have those brothers just go grab some coffee with, or
Yeah.
um, have people, it's like it's starting over, and it's tough. And the enemy recognizes that whenever we're weak, whenever we feel weak, we're like kind of get nervous, get a little anxious. The enemy, he likes that.
Oh,
And so
definitely.
we have to pray against that. And so I would
Yeah.
say, yeah, that's some of the spiritual warfare that we try to go up against is, some of those really natural feelings you can kind of assume that you would feel. You put yourselves in our spots and you're like, yeah, I think that'd be something that we deal with too.
Yeah, definitely be praying for you guys. I do miss those meetings, man, with all of us, with Mark and other Brian, and man, those were pretty fun.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, and Brian, just to go back a little bit, like, can you break down like why you really started feeling God moving you from California? Like, I know you mentioned like the California Exodus, and that was kind of like, it's a similar story that happened with a lot of people in California during that time. But what were some of the like specific reasons why you felt God calling your family out of California?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So what I always say when people ask me here, because they ask a lot, I don't know if we have an accent or what, but people often ask us, "Hey, where are you guys from?" It's like, man, is it that obvious? I go, "I'm from here, fellow Tennessean." um, and so, no, the reason I tell people that we left is price and politics, and usually folks can kind of understand that, but really. Um, Sorry, I'm still feeling a little bit under the weather. Really, what that was is, twofold. One, we were just paycheck to paycheck, and we were making too good of money to be paycheck to paycheck, and nothing, and we just didn't see any light at the end of the tunnel. We just, no matter what we did, it just didn't feel like we could get past how much it costs to live there, and the houses that we could afford, we just didn't want to buy houses where it's like, I don't want to spend $350,000 on a house that I actually don't want. It's like, I don't want to saddle myself with that huge financial burden for a place that I don't want to live in. Um, and so, that was one thing, how much the cost was. The cost is crushing. And you guys know that as well as anyone else. The cost is crushing. And knowing, I've been a student of politics and history for a long time, and it's just not going to get any better. I know with the push for electric vehicles, the price of power is going to go up. They're not making any major, improvements to the electrical grid or the infrastructure, while simultaneously mandating more drag on the system that they're not fixing. So you're going to see a lot more PG&E fires. The grid's going to be more rolling brownouts, while the cost is going to go up. So that's just, that's one part of it. The price is just, it's crushing. And then with more people leaving, the tax burden is going to fall on fewer people. And so the people that are left are going to have to pay more. Um, but then there's the politics of it. Um, with a lot of with Roe v. Wade being overturned, and the power to uh, legislate abortion going back to the states, California trying to be the anti-Florida really went, became an abortion tourism site, for lack of a better term, or reproductive health care. I think that's the euphemism that's regularly used. And so the governor often touts California as being a reproductive rights oasis. You can go there for women's reproductive rights, which is a euphemism for abortion. And so, with also coupled with the access that they're granting to illegal aliens to also get reproductive rights or reproductive health care. So basically, not only can people come to California from others, Californians and out of state Californians come get abortions. Now, anyone who is able to get across the border can get their abortions paid for by the tax dollars. And it was just the feeling of sickness that I felt in me, knowing that every time I got a paycheck, every time I swiped my card or paid for gas, that my tax dollars were going to something that I so fundamentally abhor, something that is so vile and antithetical to everything I believe as a Christian, as a person. It it became, the walls were closing in on me. Like, I just couldn't handle it. Um, and when it came down to, other issues that I was paying for with my wallet, like, it was something I was like, I just can't do it. I can't do it anymore. And the question eventually was, well, for me, my family was like, this isn't North Korea. I can leave, and it'll be tough and it's hard. I mean, it is an exceedingly challenging, but between, you put those two things and you put them in line, it's like, I don't see a future where we're able to start making enough money to live the life that I'd like to give my grandkids someday, coupled with every dollar I pay for is helping to pay for things that I just, I'm so against. All those things stacked up to, kind of point in an arrow outwards. Um, and so, that's like when people ask when I leave or whenever why we left California, usually it's not in a podcast. And so,
Right.
I usually just say, hey, they say, why'd you leave California? I say, price and politics, price and politics.
Right on.
Yeah, and like, I know like we're still here too, and I mean, obviously all these things, go through my mind still as well, and I think California as a state is very becoming more just anti-God, right? It's becoming more people centered instead of like creator centered, God centered, and we're seeing like culturally, you know, um, the public school system is just going downhill. I mean, we got our kids in a Christian school and we're really thankful for that. And we had to pay for that though. And, like, what are the schools like over there in Tennessee? Is it a big difference? Like, cause I think your kids are in public school over there, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And that's one of those things too, that, let's see, how do I say this? What is hold on, there's a word for that. Okay. Um, it cost, Aaron, do you remember how much it cost to register your car last year?
Too much money, man. We have 2 cars and I think it came out to like, shoot, 700 something bucks, maybe almost 800.
$34, bro. 34. Like I walked into this place with my bill, with my utilities bill and my new Tennessee driver's license. I said I need to register my car. Whew. What's the damage? She goes, well, that'll be for the plate and for the tag and for the thing. It'll be $34. I darn near choked up a lung, and I was like, $34, and so that's one example. And then when you talk about the schools, last year at one of the schools in Visalia, a couple adults jumped the fence at some point and found a kid who had, for whatever reason, I don't remember the exact reason, and beat the living heck out of this kid on campus. I don't know if you guys remember that or not. I think that happened last year.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
so.
I remember that.
My middle son, Zach, watched a kid get pummeled so bad that the kid's jaw had to be rewired or had to be wired shut. Um, it's completely different. Just like, like it's hard to understand, like perfect. No, like where we're at in Maryville, is it perfect? No, you have, some of the same issues, but it's not nearly the extent of what it is that we have begotten or what we've gotten used to back where we're from. Um, the boys actually call it boring sometimes because it's just, there's a lot more parent involvement. I got 3 phone calls in a week, from teachers because the boys weren't getting A's. Um, there's a big push for ACT out here, which I know a lot of the California schools have gotten rid of. A lot of the public colleges have gotten rid of the requirement for ACT and SATs. And so that's been a bit of a difference, is getting the boys, prepped for ACT for schools. Um, but yeah, I mean, the parent involvement, just the way the culture is very different when it comes to like students. So yeah, it's been tough because I know that a lot of the California schools have gotten rid of a lot of standards. Um, and they've reduced their standards, like you're not allowed to fail, you can't suspend or expel kids for behaviors anymore.
Hmm.
And I believe that Governor Newsom just got rid of teachers, at least in elementary age school, being able to take away a kid's recess as a punitive action. So, you talk to some of the teachers at, that work for VUSD or for California schools and say, what are you allowed to do to, um, punish, not the right word. What do you have to be able to do to correct a kid who has used profanity or, assaulted a kid or, any of these various other things? And they'll tell you for the most part, their hands are tied in a lot of ways. There's just not a lot that they can do. And a lot of the kids will tell you that too. A lot of kids just, they know it. Kids are smart. You push where there's mush, and that's, and where the kids can get away with something, they'll definitely get away with it. And so a lot of those standards have been taken away. And so, at least for here, for the most part, they haven't gotten rid of them. And so the boys have been actually challenged academically, because all of a sudden, they're not allowed their phones. They're not allowed to be on their phones. They're not allowed to have AirPods at all. And, they're being held to a higher standard academically. And it's been an adjustment, because now all of a sudden they're having to work a lot harder than they had to before. And so it's been an adjustment for everybody, for sure.
And like I know this area too of California is more conservative. It is more still kind of got like more of like a religious scent in the people, but I know like in Tennessee and a lot of places like in the South and stuff like that, like it's still very like culturally Christian. And like you mentioned earlier, a lot more churches out there. And it's funny because I remember visiting Nashville like in 2018, and back then I was a little more like kind of get like woke, and so I kind of saw this as like a bad thing, and now I'm like, how stupid is that, But anyways, but like I visit Nashville, I'm like, man, there's a church on every corner over here, like cultural Christianity and all that. But like now I watch videos on that stuff. I'm like, I wish we had more of that. And we have it here, but I wish there was more, like I saw a video of someone who moved to Tennessee. I don't remember where exactly, but they said even like the Sabbath is more like observed like on Sundays, right? Like a lot of like businesses are like closed down. I think you can't buy alcohol on Sundays. Like I don't know what it's like in your area, but like just a lot more culturally Christian or culturally conservative. Are you experiencing any of that there?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, the amount of, Jesus is king, Jesus loves you, billboards and signs, just, like all over the place. You don't, once you live in it, and I try to tell folks that are from here, it's like, you don't realize like how different it is here than other places they are coming from. But when you first come here, it's startling to see how much Jesus is everywhere, yeah. And the pace is a lot slower. The speed limits aren't as high. So, you're used to traveling a lot faster, and then you get here and folks are just a little more chill, like things just kind of go at a slower pace. And yeah, things slow down a lot on Sunday because, for the most part, I say I try not to speak in too many absolutes, but for the most part, a lot of folks go to church. I mean, whenever Cass and I first got here into this neighborhood, into this area, I think we were asked probably 4 or 5 times by people that we had just met, like, hey, we're Brian, when you're there, they're like, hey, well, what church do you go to?
Wow.
It was a very common question to meet someone for the first time. I go, hey, what church are you going to? And they say, well, yeah, I'm going to this church over here. I'm going to that church, And so, and I thought that was interesting. I was like, what a neat outreach that I never even just thought of. Like, I meet somebody new. Hey, I'm Brian. Hey, by the way, what church do you go to? And it's just, and I thought that was a neat thing to hear. Cause like I said, we were asked that question by 4 separate people in 4 separate occasions. And so, yeah, it's the cultural Christianity out here. It's a lot more prevalent. It's not, like I said, it's not perfect by any stretch of the means. Like any amount of issues that the country is dealing with, you do have here. It's just on a much smaller scale.
Right on. I don't know, Joe, did you have any other like questions you want to ask Brian?
I think I'm good, man. I'm good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you enjoying more of the gun culture out there? And
yeah,
freedom
I
on
remember that? I remember Mark made a joke about that once or twice. And the what I would call the gun culture out in Tennessee is not what you think, what Californians think it is. Um, there's some gun ranges, but I'll tell you, like, I haven't seen anybody with a slung shotgun, or like open carrying. Um, so it is very conservative, about, when it comes to firearms. And there's a lot, ranges and gun shows, and they sell guns at pawn shops and, normal stuff. But I would say that it is not more in your face than what it is in the valley.
Hmm.
And so, like I said, I know some places have open carry laws. If it's open carry, it might be open carry here. I think I saw one guy. I think since I've been here, I've seen one guy open carrying. Um, and so, yeah, the gun culture isn't what some folks perceive it to be, is what I would say.
I was just like, recently I saw Tim Kennedy share this story online. That guy in LA, he had some kind of connection with them, but the guy, and he got this all on video, like on his like Ring camera or something, but was coming home late at night, and two guys came behind him and tried to rob him. And he like throws his hot coffee on them first, and then he's carrying, so he like, goes to defend himself. I think no one gets hurt. The guys run off, but they just announced this a couple days ago that they actually pulled the guy's gun permit, and he was like defending himself, right? Like
I saw that.
And it's like only in California. I mean, I guess there are probably other places like New York or something like that too. But yeah, I don't think that would happen in Tennessee, right?
No, I don't think so. But I did want to say one thing real quick to you guys. While I was sitting here, I was, we were having this talk, and I just wanted to share with you guys that for anybody that's thinking about considering leaving or considering, has made the decision to stay, I would just say that, no matter what God puts on your heart, take comfort and be courageous in the comfort that you're doing what God put on your heart to do. Because if he's telling you to leave and you have fear about what that looks like, take comfort in the fact that he'll provide for you a way to make that happen. And, for those folks that are staying and you're like, oh, I don't know, this is tough, we're behind enemy lines on this one, I would say the same thing applies. Take comfort in that, the Lord's going to provide, and he's going to provide you with the tools, the words, the means, the methods to, fight that war on, whether it's staying on the home front or whether it's, being part of the Exodus. But if, one of the things that this move has done for me and Cassie and for the kids is really, truly in a deep way show that, whenever we talk about believing and having faith that the Lord will provide for us, that is true in a way that we sometimes take for granted. And so, for Joseph and for you, Aaron, and for Jenkins, one of your last guests, I love that interview. Whenever God puts on your heart, says, hey, I need you to stay back and I need you to fight this fight, amen. Because, the Lord's he'll provide either way. And so, yeah, I just want to say God's good, man.
Amen. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. I know, I forget who said it, but where God guides, God provides.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. So, we miss you, man. I know we still stay in touch, so it's always good to hear from you. And it's good to see that you're doing well. Good to be in a good Bible teaching church. You got to listen to one of your pastor's sermons, that one that you sent me.
Yeah, amen.
And we're really happy for you, man. Miss you, but really happy for you. And thanks for joining us on here. I'm sure it's going to be encouragement to some people considering the move too. So thanks for those words too, just sharing that. I think that's all I got. So
yeah, thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it. Love you guys. Yeah. I miss you guys too.
Love you
Have
too,
a good
bro.
evening, man.
All right.